I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
I love to see my people party with me, man. Good to see you, Black Brown, Sweet Nikita, Miss Rhonda. Hey, happy birthday, Miss J. Hey, Rhea, Sweet Sharita. Party with me all night long. Say what? That's right, baby. Bring it to the front. Hey, Janine. Well, guess what? Hey, when I see you there, I get a little happy. Hey, Black Brown, I get a little happy when I see you. What? Baby, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Francine, I get a little happy when you party with me. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, Jay, hey, Randy, I get happy when you party with me. Guess what? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, Cole, I get a little happy when I see you. What? When I see you, yeah, 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 yeah. Listen, fellas, I put your picture on my mirror. Start to blush when somebody says your name. And my stomach is a pain. See you walk in my direction, I go the other way. I start to stutter when I speak. Try to stand, but my knees go weak. What's happening to me? Anybody can you tell me what it means? I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Wish on a star for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, see you. Hey, Marlon, you sexy boy. Hey, oh no. When I see you. Hey fellas, listen. I scribble X and O's on my notebook, checking how my hair and my nails look. I feel myself up in the
Now,
zone.
Philly Jared is still
Say I'm not
streamed. I think
see your
they're still
face,
live
hear
over there,
my
Millennial.
favorite song. Should I
And I'm
sing
not
it
mad if
now?
folks feel like they need to go and come on back later. It's all good. They were killing it over there.
Or do you have a clue? Yeah, I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Was on a star for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. See you. Yeah. Marlon, so sexy boy. Oh no.
Yeah, peace, everybody. Come on in.
When I see you.
Oh, wow. Many thanks, Martin. Appreciate you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Peace.
Something now is taking over me. Ooh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, word.
I'm not gonna run, I'm just gonna stand here and see. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, old computers are welcome.
See you, yeah. Sitting so sexy, boy. Yeah. Oh no. When I see you. Hey, Fox, hold me down. Listen. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, sweet Savita. Hey.
Peace, yes. Likewise. Good to see you out there, too.
When I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Tony, I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Tim, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Marlon, I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Jay, when I see
happy to help. Samantha's very dope. More work coming.
I get a little happy when I see you. What? Hey, when I see you, yeah. Hey, Playboy, I get a little happy. What? Happy when you party with me. Hey, when I see you.
I mix what I like. All right, everybody. Yeah, welcome back to I Mix What I Like. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Please like, share, subscribe. In the show description, where you can find all the other ways to do whatever and all the things, you will also find the links to our previous discussion with our guest and link to his current work. So please avail yourself of all of that. If they're not wrapped up, I'm not mad at folks. If they're over there at Millennials, please, I'm never mad at folks feeling conflicted. You can always come on back over here and check this out later or join the live later and all of those good things. Tomorrow, Sudeep is back talking more about the Donut King project and Ghassan Kanafani's work. Just read another of his short books on the Palestine revolt. And speaking of Samantha, we did a discussion of the film Palestine 3-6 about the 1936 revolt, and which we'll be talking about again tomorrow with Sudeep in the context of our Donut King project. So check all that stuff out whenever you get a chance if you haven't already. And thank you very much. Peace, Renee. Thank you. Okay, right on. And definitely every Saturdays with Renee is dope on Black Liberation Media, but definitely check out the if you haven't, Laura Sheha's book, which I have right here and was just referencing again, From the Clinic to the Streets, Psychoanalysis. I keep calling it Psychic Militancy. That's her podcast, but it's From the Clinic to the Streets, Psychoanalysis for Revolutionary Futures. And we've looked at it before, as it turns out, but I was actually just looking at and maybe we'll talk about it with Two Black, but I was just looking at the report that she references that I will be throwing in people's faces forever around elections, about the least of evils as psychological warfare. And so I was just looking at the U.S. Army PsyOps tactics manual from 2007, I believe, where she got that from, and it's just ridiculous. So all right, so please support everything, do all the things, and let me bring back co-host the two of Black Miss podcast on Black Liberation Media and all over your spaces. Two Black, welcome back to the platform. Good to see you again. How you feeling?
What's good?
Nothing.
Yeah, I was watching Millennials while we were waiting. So
yeah, and yeah, I'm joking, but yeah, a lot is not good, and including all the ramped up attacks on Cuba. So that was a very dope discussion. I'm glad I caught most of it myself. And if folks missed it, please go see it. Musa was there. Alex Avenia was there. And the Undefeated Chat was there. So you know. But so listen, you are continuing this series on violence and nonviolence with a new piece, Nonviolence is Violence 2. We all in the gunk. Why don't you offer up any introductory remarks you'd like about it, and then we can chat about it for a little bit. And again, it's I think what you're doing here is very, very dope.
Thank you. It's funny. I mean, you know how it works with writing. So originally, this was always supposed to be one essay. That never happens, but this is all supposed to be one essay.
Hey, real quick before you get started, my bad, I'm just hearing it. I don't know. Check your mic setting just real quick.
You hear me?
Just to make, I do hear you. It just sounds like the mic isn't actually plugged in for some reason or on or something. But I just want to double check. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, it's not that big a deal. If it's all set up, it's
Is
not.
it
I don't.
louder though?
It's the same. It sounds the same, which is
Let me
which
check
is.
my. Let me check my.
I mean, we can hear you fine. It just sounds like the mic might not
Sounds
be
like my
on
mic's
or
not
plugged in.
plugged in.
Yeah. But it's not it's not something that would stop the discussion at all. It's just
No,
wanted
I
to just
see.
make
I
sure
see
if you got a
that.
chance.
Hold on a
But
second.
if you do have a chance to, then so folks, as he's getting this fixed, please make sure, again, you check the show description for all the links to everything. And
Is that better?
oh, that's perfect. There you go.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
way better. There it is. Okay, there we go. All
Yeah,
right.
this mic is great when it works, but sometimes it just be spazzing out. It usually does it in Zoom meetings and not live, but here we are. But
If I got into how much, like, the pre-show routine gets a little crazy sometimes, checking and double checking, because you never can really, you're not always sure when the thing is going to cut in and out depending on when you open up what device and app, and then you got to restart stuff. It's all kinds of a mess. So yeah, I get it. But anyway, please go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, like I said, it was originally supposed to be one essay, and when I was doing all the research for it, I was trying to come up with 3 primary arguments. But the first argument, the one that I was on here about last time, that turns nonviolence into sacrificial violence, I think became an argument that just needed its own focus by itself. But there were originally 3 arguments. So there was the sacrificial violence argument, which was me trying to re-understand not what people call nonviolence, where it's for nonviolence to be, I'm skimming through this, so there's more, but for nonviolence to really be successful, you need violence, which therefore creates a contradiction, because how can you call it nonviolence if you need violence, right? So we gave those different examples. So I was like, it's not really nonviolence, it's sacrificial violence, because you were sacrificing yourself, hoping to provoke your opponent to demonstrate their ill will, their immorality, whatever, to bring people to your side to fight them. But then there's these other things, they all intersect. The 2 other arguments that are presented in this piece is that even when you're doing the sacrificial approach, you are either, if you're in this case of a movement like the civil rights movement, where you are marching to get rights within a construct or within a state, you need to get the gun aimed at your enemies. So you're trying to get the state to renegotiate its resources somewhere else. So once upon a time, the South had full reign over Black people, and then the federal government was standing by the side, and by the civil rights movement marching and engaging in what they call nonviolent, direct action and boycotts and things of that nature. You pressure the federal government to enforce laws in your favor, but you don't enforce laws through paper. You don't enforce laws through your mind. You enforce laws through guns. You enforce law through a state that has monopoly over violence. And then the third argument is that sometimes, you and I may go to the street and we might take the beating, for the greater cause. And some people will watch that and they'll be inspired, but they won't be inspired to respond in the same way. They'll be inspired to burn down someone's building, to slash somebody's throats, right? Like, and this happened, just quickly, you even think about the civil rights movement. I didn't reference this story in the piece, but it was in my book about the Birmingham riots. So the famous story is where Dr. King goes down into Birmingham and they desegregate, and you see the dogs being attacked, or the dogs attacking the Black people, and them being water hosed by Bull Connor. Well, like the morning after that, somebody bombs I think Dr. King's brother's home and also the hotel he's staying at. So Black people rioted and they stabbed cops in the street and they burned buildings. And that's actually, Malcolm talks about this in the message to the grassroots. That's actually when Kennedy gets on the TV and says, we need a civil rights bill, right? But that part often gets left out of history. So you might inspire people, but you may not inspire them to do like the nonviolent way. So that's what we're calling insurgent violence, right? Like the people, in the masses of people take it there, and they're like, we're not gonna, and what that does is that in some ways, if the movement is working, it will strengthen the position of the people who are more moderate or nonviolent, right? So, you know, I have a quote in there of Malcolm X, and I'm paraphrasing it, but he basically, you know, talks about like when he would go to the South and he would basically try to scare white folks so they would listen to Martin Luther King, because it's like, well, this is what the alternative is if you don't listen to him, right? And that's so there was a study called that talked about the positive radical flank, and how when groups move further to the left, when groups become more militant, it increases funding for the more moderate groups, and it strengthens their bargaining positions for their reform. So even for reformists, I would always say you should push people to want to go as far left as they can, because whatever you actually want has much better chance of going through versus if you get to be the most radical person in the room and all you want is like healthcare or something. You're probably not going to get it, right? So those are the three arguments again: is sacrificial violence, state violence, and then insurgent violence. So there's more obviously, but those are like the three arguments that are laid out within the two pieces.
No, right on. Like the late great Dr. James Turner, founding director of the Africana Studies Research Center, Cornell University, used to say all the time, you need an inside and an outside game.
Yeah.
And we keep sending people inside with no outside game. And although I know the game has changed, the metaphor doesn't necessarily hold anymore, but the point I think is still clear. So yeah, right on. I did want to just you may have done this already, but just for those of us who maybe, myself specifically, projecting, onto, I don't mean to project on the others, but I struggle a lot with abstract concepts. So and how people use them. So I went down an intellectual rabbit hole of sorts around your deployment of the term gunk.
Mm-hmm.
And even in searching up images for the thumbnail, like what how does but what does that mean? For you, what is the gunk that we're now all in?
Yeah, I'll read the piece maybe, and then I'll break that down. But thanks for that question. I'll read the opening that you're referring to. When living under the boot of oppression, even the gunk can become a weapon for those underneath it. With oxygen at a premium, anything and everything becomes a tactic to loosen the pressure on one's neck. Some will shoot, some will stab, some will kick, some will swing, some will even die, trying to regain breath. All are sorting through the gunk, attempting to make something of the sewage. Born betwixt the icky wedges of the boot, nonviolence is no less messy. It oozes out of the same assortment of gunk as armed struggle. Both rely on the ability of death to heighten the contradiction between the boot and the neck. Both are imperfect actions taken to navigate a violent dilemma, for we do not choose the conditions in which we struggle. Our windpipes seek air wherever the passage is clearest. It's funny, I was talking, this is a quick aside, I was talking to somebody about one day I want to come on here and go over poems with you and see how that would operate.
Hell yeah.
Just breaking them down. But so this was written
anytime. Yeah.
This was written more in that voice, but I mean, what I was essentially trying to do, I guess, to just get to the crux of it was there's a way that nonviolence, particularly the propaganda of it, likes to act as if it's above the fray of the activity that other people believe they have to engage in, right? But I'm like, you come to the conclusion that you need to be nonviolent, even if that's your position, under the same boot that I come to the conclusion that we need armed struggle, right? You come to that conclusion in the very same position, and under the boot is all this gunk, right? And gunk is really just an assortment of shit. It's just everything that you step on throughout the day. And when you're under a boot, you're going to use whatever you can use to get up from under the boot. And that creates all the other contradictions. It's just as imperfect as somebody picking up a gun. It's just as imperfect. Like, everybody's going to do what they can to get up from out under that, right? It doesn't make one better than the other. Obviously, you can debate about tactically what's the best direction, what will lead to the best outcome. Like, those are real debates to have. But you start underneath the boot like everybody else. And there's a way, I think, sometimes that when folks talk about nonviolence, particularly since the eras we're referring to in this piece, but like particularly in these more modern times, like we're not gonna get our hands dirty. But I'm like, your hands are already dirty because you're under the boot. So there is no not getting your hands dirty, right? And it also is a setup how even when throughout the piece we lay out, nonviolent folks, for instance, do get their hands dirty. They do, like in the case of the civil rights movement, they do build a kind of coalition with the federal government to defeat Jim Crow. And unfortunately, by doing that, Dr. King is so in deep with them that when he breaks away from that coalition, he's assassinated within a year. Like you are in bed with people who do have guns and military and own the means of production and can enforce rule upon people. And you're doing that because you're trying to get up from under the boot. So I'm not judging it, but you need that to do it. So armed struggle is just you're in the same position. You're looking up at the boot and you're like, how do I get out of here? And you're gonna pull whatever it is. So it's really just to like put nonviolence in the mud with everybody else. And because part of it relies on a certain innocence that I don't think necessarily exists. Like we're just getting beat and these people are mean, and it's like obviously this is part of the strategy, and I get why it relies on that. I think it's been very effective in certain moments, so I'm not knocking it entirely, but we all exist in the gunk, we all exist in the shit, we all exist in oppression. There is no standing above it, and then judging people because they chose to pick up an arm. The judgment should be whether what they did actually got all the people up from under the boot, right? So if you want to go get a good job and live in a suburb and move away from everybody and not be bothered, like that's a way to get up front. I guess you're not getting out from under the boot, but maybe you found a better wedge underneath the boot, right? Like maybe you have found a place with less gunk, and that's your way to do it. But with nonviolence is saying we're trying to get up from under it. All right, I can accept that, but you're still under it, right? And that's all it's really trying to get at is we're all looking for ways to get the boot off our neck. We're all looking for means of ways to breathe, to live, to prosper, and we all start from that position. So the people who look in their situation and feel like they need to, like we're using like even in Iran, for instance, and they feel like they need to deploy a lot of their money to military, a lot of the resources, the limited resources that they do have, so the revolution can survive. People from the outside will look at that and be like, well, don't take care of their people, as if the revolution surviving is not a means of taking care of your people, right? So, but they're under the gunk, literally under sanctions, literally under U.S. imperialism. So the decisions that people make should be understood in that context and not from this like moralistic violence is so corrupting kind of thing, which, you read some of Dr. King's early work, that's, even though there's vague references and some of that might have been ghostwritten by Bayard Rustin, but still that's the kind of references that they make, like violence.
Yeah, the stuff with King is funny, man. They'll say like the earlier, politically softer stuff is Rustin ghostwriting, and then when he gets radical, they say Stanley Levinson was ghostwriting. So it's like, did the man do any? It's like, come on, son. Like, and listen. But anyway.
Yeah, I've never been able to verify that entirely. I've just seen people make those accusations, like in that, what was it, Bear in the Cross book or so. I can't remember the exact name.
The FBI would make the claims around Levinson. They are, because black people don't do anything radical without white communists, inspiring or leading the way. So
now there were letters of Rustin and I cannot remember off the top of my head the other white guy he was dealing with, that they thought King needed a ghostwriter.
Levinson said this. Yeah, Levinson said that. Yeah. I mean, he was very and he claimed it himself. But all I'm saying is that the idea that there is no black radicalism with it, and with King, it's like there's no king without someone doing something for him, and then there's no black radicalism without white left. That's all I was,
Yeah.
By the way, also,
it gives communist conspiracy, kind of energy sometimes, So
and yes, Harding wrote a lot of the Beyond Vietnam speech and a couple of others, and then thankfully in one of the reissues of Where Do We Go From Here, Harding said or was it Coretta? One of them said that King's radicalism was underattended to, something to that. They at least pointed that,
Well, I mean, even if we accepted these things, I know we got to talk about the piece, but I'm saying even if we accepted these things or that he did have some assistance or whatever, he still proved whatever went out. So that's still.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I just think it's.
So he still put his name on it. Yeah, if you put your name on it, and you're going to take shots for these ideas, literally in the case of Vietnam, take shots for this. So I think that's more than enough,
of course.
And this is a busy man on the road, 200 different locations a year,
well, a lot of people, myself included, have had people through editing and discussions and reviews. They have an imprint on what the final product is. It doesn't mean that it's just, and then people,
including this very piece we're talking about had an editor. I mean, I still wrote it, but I had an editor, and we go back and forth about stuff all the time. So
exactly. So I did just want to point out, because it was funny that I thought it was interesting that when you mentioned that people would want to decry that Iran bolstering its military is somehow evidence that they don't care about their people, while Trump literally said recently there's no health care because we got to raise the military budget to $1.5 trillion. So it's like the U.S. is literally, I mean, they're literally saying the same thing. We don't have nothing for you as citizens because we got to go to war. So it's like, why?
For a country that we're telling y'all wants a nuclear bomb that's never wanted one.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. I mean, so it's beyond, it's just, again, levels of absurdity. I did, if you would, and I meant to ask this earlier, but would you mind, again, to the extent you haven't already, say a little bit more, kind of even restating the initial thesis of these two parts so far, that is this dialectical relationship between violence and nonviolence that you're talking about. Could you, just in case, well, even for my own edification, but just in case anybody is not seeing all of these in order or remembering,
well, I'll just go all the way back to even what moved me to even think about this, because I think there is when I was even on the end of millennials, and Musa was talking about how, we need real anti-imperialism, not this kind of like nuance mongering, I think is what he called it. And there's a tendency to, which is probably, if I write anything, if I end up doing a book on this, or even just writing more pieces, the next will probably deal with this kind of, I think, broader issue that we have with this race to victimhood that we kind of have going on sometimes on the left. And I know victimhood is a loaded word for people, but I stand by that. But I think what I mean by that in this case, related to the piece, is there's this inability to like deal with people as full human beings who struggle in different ways, and we tend to relate to them very well when they're simply just victims, right? So when they're being bombed innocently, and they're hungry innocently, and they are being taken advantage of and stuff, people like, oh, Cuba can't be fed, Cuba's running out of oil and all that, like then people tend to have like this response like, oh my God, this is terrible. But when you suggest that maybe to deal with that kind of problem, that there needs to be more than just humanitarian aid and some kind of negotiated treaty or something that has no real enforcement value, and you say that part of dealing with that is armed resistance and people have the right to that, and even if that doesn't always go as cleanly as you would like it to, like that's just something that moves the world. There's this tendency for people to then get squeamish, and they're not as supportive. So to not seem entirely terrible, they will support Palestine in this kind of utopian hypothetical sense, like as just kind of these people that just die and get bombed. But then, when Palestinians take up arms, they're like, well, we still denounce that. So you have this, what Hamas did on October 7th was terrible, but Israel has overreacted or something like that. And that might seem like a decent moral position, like on its face, if you're not really investigating the details, but it doesn't really create a pathway for actual Palestinian liberation, because all you can really do is ask the government of your country to grant it, or Israel to grant it. You're not allowing them to grant themselves anything. So there's this aversion to like force, and there's aversion to violence. Um, so I just noticed that tendency. So when we get to, so when as I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, nonviolence is what people will say is the best way, because you don't have to kill anybody, you don't have to hurt anybody. But I'm like, you are offering yourself to be killed, right? That's why I say in the first piece, somebody's got to die. You are offering yourself to be harmed. Somebody gets hurt. Anybody that does this for real and is serious about it knows what the implications are. They know what the dangers are when they walk into it. The freedom riders, used to write obituaries before they went on the rise, understanding that this could be the end. And again, I don't knock that. I think that's noble. I think that's useful. But you are implicitly saying that violence is necessary for this really to work. You are saying that, like, if you go down south and the southern people don't do anything to you, then what you're complaining about to the people you're trying to get on your side, they're gonna be like, well, it doesn't really seem like it's that big of a deal, right? But if you go down south and they bomb your church, and they try to blow up your bus, these are references that are made in the first piece, then people are like, oh shit, this is bad, like we need to do something. So what are they going to do? They're going to say the government needs to do something. And what's the government going to do? They're going to send in troops. They're going to enforce laws. They're going to create penalties for Southern crackers that, if they do something that puts them in prison or fines them or something. And these things all require violence, right? So there's no way around it, right? There's like violence is inevitable in the situation. So that's why I was like, what sacrificial violence? Because you were willing to consume the violence and not like spit it right back at them, right? So if someone hits me, I'm willing to not respond, so I can heighten the contradiction of their evil, of their injustice. But that's why this piece is trying to like tie together these other elements, because even in that interaction, even if they are violent towards you and people are shocked and in awe, how does that materially get dealt with? There has to be some pressure put on them, and it's not going to just be a boycott. It's also going to be the state intervening to enforce specific laws, and the laws are not enforced through like just ideas. They're enforced through men with guns, police, military, etc., right? And you maintain that violence. You literally are authorizing certain people to carry guns and weapons, and you were saying it is okay for those people to do it. That is violence. Now, people can get into, well, that's just force, it's not violence. I'm not interested in those debates. I think they kind of coincide, but I'm saying violence is like always in it. So nonviolence really just becomes, I talked later in the piece about the propaganda of it, but it becomes more of you need the innocence. You kind of need that victimhood to like win the battle, because you need to appear above, like I was saying, you need to appear above the fray. You need to appear like you have the moral high ground. And we do have the moral high ground, but not in the way that is often understood, where there's just we're disconnected from violence whatsoever, because we ourselves put ourselves in the front line, as if there's not all these other mechanisms that are involved in actually bringing about even a modicum of justice.
Right on. And everybody, again, the link to the piece is in the show description, and make sure you check it out if you haven't already. And so you mentioned something that I actually, you mentioned a lot of things that I want to bring up. So, but I'll start with the one of my favorite points, which is your what you've had to say about, as you just said, nonviolent propaganda, rather.
Mm-hmm.
And I even like the way you've written this. Again, I'm struggling and trying to rephrase, my own approach to Black capitalism and financial literacy, and trying to sort of recenter the discussion by defining it as some sort of propaganda and nothing else. So I really liked when I read this line here, but I'd like you to elaborate from your perspective what you mean by this when you're saying in this sense. And I know you've previously described it, so if you say what you were talking about, but in this sense you say nonviolence is more propaganda than reality. By appearing defenseless, it creates a veneer of innocence. Innocence yields the propaganda value of the moral high ground, and then you go on. But this point that nonviolence is more propaganda than reality, what do you mean by that, or what are you saying there?
Well, part of it, I'll read a little bit later, but part of it is just simply, to the average person, all the background mechanisms we're naming, that doesn't even like click for them. And that's kind of how propaganda, because neither one of us think propaganda is entirely a bad thing, right? So we don't operate from that position. So I'm not even saying that means nonviolence is garbage or terrible. It's just what propaganda does is oversimplify things to move people to a position, right? Like that's what it does, I guess, effectively, if it's done well. Sometimes it oversimplifies things by flat out lying, right? And just distorting what reality is. Other times it just simplifies things because to go through the inner workings of everything, people don't hold their attention span and they can't really get there. I think nonviolence is a little bit of both in terms of how we think about it, because it's to the people that are watching, the Black folks in the South or India, because I used 3 examples and I used Ghana. Ghana doesn't get as much attention. The positive action movement doesn't get as much attention in nonviolent kind of lore as the other 2. That's part of why I wanted to put it in there. Shout out to Nick Thompson for pushing me on that. But to the average person, it's like you have all these people who have done nothing wrong, who are outside just demanding their rights and their freedom. And you have these mean people who come in and they stomp them and they beat them and they kill them, right? And that's not right, and something needs to be done, right? That is how, if you are working on the side of the so-called nonviolent folks, that's how you want it framed. We're just here. We're trying to get what's deserved of us. We want freedom. We want liberation, and these people are trying to stop us. Like it's a great framing to move people. Like I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's just that's not really what is entirely happening. You are courting violence. It's like you are walking up to, like I used in the first piece, you are poking the bear and trying to take the bear's honey. And the bear's not going to just give you their honey, right? It doesn't morally make you a bad person or anything, but you are poking the bear. You honestly, I think you need to poke the bear, right? And then you were also looking for some kind of assistance, or you are looking yourself to seize the violence yourself to move it in a different direction, if you're talking about independence, right? So all of that disappears from how we talk about it. So there was a part, just the paragraph, I think above, and the part you were posting, it says, I can start reading it, but it's just right above the one of the propaganda paragraph. You can go down.
Yep. And I do want you to come back and talk a little bit about positive action. But when we find this,
thus to the sympathetic onlooker, or that paragraph is cool. History. I'll just read above it. History shows that wherever oppression exists, confrontation is inevitable, but there is rarely uniformity in how it's confronted. Since nonviolence derives its currency from seeming above the violent gunk, like we talked about earlier, the lack of uniformity complicates its narrative, right? And uniformity is in the lack of, if everybody's not taking that position, if you can't beat everybody, into nonviolence, then it complicates the innocence of it, right? So for its own preservation, nonviolence flattens the very histories of confrontations it's been entangled with. It needs to tell this kind of mythology that all nonviolence was gained through simply that, and there were no other assistance. There was, Yet, since nonviolence and violence are opposite sides of the same dice, so any means of separating them is a crapshoot. Thus, to the sympathetic onlooker, nonviolence neither provokes violence nor inspires others to engage in it on their behalf. Its practitioners are simply laying down their lives for a noble cause, spotless of any drooling blood. It need not matter if the throw of a Molotov cocktail or the boot of the state stands behind them in support, right? So it's like all of those things disappear, and it's just people laying their lives down, and that's just not really what's happening. But to maintain the myth, and this is like the weakness of it, I think, throughout its since it kind of peaked in that mid 20th century time period, to maintain that myth, it is had to like tell history in a way that didn't really happen. So even with like the Indian independence movement, there was a lot of complementary violence that went along with it, right? There was armed struggle in the Indian independence movement, but most of us only hear about Gandhi and only hear about like non-cooperation or the different those different kind of boycotts and things of that nature. That's what we hear about. We don't hear about the different like militias, what people call the terrorist movement, which is a different kind of connotation there. What we don't hear about, I think it was the Indian National Army. That probably is what really forces independence in the first place, because there was a army that formed on its own that tried to take over India when the government arrested them and they were going to execute them. The actual army that worked for the colonial government they mutinied. They're like, we're not going to allow this to happen. So that forced the British to basically be like, oh, we're gonna have to give them we're gonna probably have to give them independence. So that was like 1946. They get independence by 47. That happens after any of Gandhi's campaigns. So, and there's also evidence that Gandhi and Nehru and others were in conversation with the more militant groups who were like seizing land and seizing territory and have more autonomy. But we don't hear that, right? Like that's not part of the lore that we tell the children. We tell the children that, Martin Luther King went outside and he got beat up and it was terrible. Rosa Parks sat on the bus. Gandhi was this feeble, nice guy. We don't even hear about Ghana, but even when the stuff I read, even that was a bit slanted in how they talked about him. But so we don't hear like what really happened, right? So even like we're getting more of that lately with within our kind of within our borders of the United States, we starting to hear more about the Deacons or the Panthers, but people still talk about these things like they're like opposite sides or something. Like there's this like a buffet of options, and I'm like, that's not even how it went down either. Like so it's like there's these things were made way more complicated as liberation movements tend to be. But for nonviolence, particularly in this context, in like 2026, to keep selling itself, it has to like besmirch any of those contradictions. It tends to besmirch them, and that's why it's become more of a tool of the state, in my opinion, than it is like something for liberation so much. Because now like there's military journals in the United States that promote teaching civil disobedience in the military, and they promote teaching it to even dissidents in other countries, right? Like this is stuff I didn't include, but this is stuff I read through that even got me to some of this literature, right? So they see it as something that can be used for like color revolutions. Like we see this in Iran, right? Like where it's just these innocent protesters and the numbers keeps changing. One day it killed 10,000, next day they killed 20,000. Trump said they killed 42,000. There's no documentation of all of this. But then again, their propaganda sucks. So they'll tell you like, yeah, but we did give them arms or whatever, right? But it's like, but these color revolutions that emerge in certain countries, and Domenico Lacerda writes about this in his book on nonviolence, like they'll emerge and they seem innocent. And then next thing you know, they get arms, but then we don't hear about that because we just see people getting ran over or something. Or there's even what is it, how do you say it, the shit that happened in China, that picture of the tank, Tiananmen Square or whatever, He writes about that and how that was
Tiananmen Square. Yeah.
Tiananmen Square,
Yeah.
and how that
No, go
was
ahead.
say what?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But yeah, that was, you get the picture of the person standing in front of the tank, but like Lasordo shows how like the Chinese government, and this was Western research that proves this, was like literally telling their military to do the least they could to not hurt anybody, the tank to not run anybody over. But that image is used as like this big deal, this slaughter that happened, right? And this tyrannical government, this authoritarian government, those kind of images are used to promote authoritarianism and to promote like these places are tyrannical and they're horrible and that's why they need to be overthrown. So now nonviolence often is used, particularly across the world, as a means for regime change. It's used as a means for intervention, right? It's used as a means for sanctions. It's used as a means for imperialism, right? So that's why I think the nonviolent folks need to, and again, I know there are, and I've met some who try to separate themselves from these things, but nonviolence in many ways has been captured, laundered by the state to perform this kind of propaganda where oppressed people don't have the right to violence, right? They only supposed to resist in a specific kind of way. And if they choose to do it differently, then there's all these other implications. They lose funding, whatever, right? So we do that here, even in the United States, where we besmirch anything. There was this shit, I think it was in Boston, and I have to send you the clip, but like there was a group, I think it was a union or something. They were protesting ICE. And I beg you now, I looked this up. I saw it on IG, but I looked it up to make sure it was real. And they were protesting ICE, and they got like hundreds of pounds of ice, like literal ice, like you would put in your cup, and they threw it in the ocean or threw it in the river. And they said, since we can't throw we're non-violent, so we can't throw actual ice agents in the river, we're gonna throw ice into the river. Like, this is the kind of silly shit. This is the kind of silly shit that people be doing. I mean, dead ass. Like, she literally says it. She's like, we're non-violent, so we won't throw ice agents in the river, but we're gonna throw ice in the river. And it's just like, I gotta find it since, but it's just like, that's how ridiculous some of this has gotten, where it's become a tool. And Lasordo talks.
So do they see that as the equivalent of like, would that be the equivalent of burning an effigy or something like, something like that? Or is that like are they, is that in their, like, is that for them the equivalent? I'm just trying to think, like, what is that supposed to mean for you? Or how is that?
I don't know, but like, yeah, they burn. They're at least burning of an effigy. I think burning just has a better symbolic.
Is even more of a
yeah, but throwing ice.
No disrespect to the effigy burning people. I'm just
but throwing water in water basically is what they're doing. Like, I really thought it was a joke. Like, I was like, because people be manipulated, but I was like, and I reposted, this is shit I be talking about. But like, that's how bad it's gotten. It's become a kind of meme of itself, right? Because that's what that is. Like, you just memed yourself, basically. Like, you're throwing ice in the river, and it was like 300 something pounds, man. So I was thinking about even like logistically how much work that would take to like. It's
like you might as well just punch somebody in the face for all of that.
It wasn't like they just went to like, McDonald's and just threw the rest of their drink in the ocean.
Right. They got a wheelbarrow, a cart.
Yeah. And I'm just like, this is the kind of ineffectiveness, inactivity that, and again, as I tried to lay out in my first piece, I think when done well, nonviolence, as I said, is about confrontation, right? This is not confrontational. This is a joke.
I mean, because that's where I'm at. Because I actually was thinking logistically too, but in the terms of where I'm at these days, and I was thinking, imagine that being why my back got thrown out. Like, that's like, like, like I'm laid up and somebody's like, "Oh, Jared, man, what happened?" I'm like, "Man, I dumped 300 pounds of ice in the water." You know what I'm saying? It's like,
to get rid of ice.
To get rid of ice. It's like, I mean,
yeah, I gotta find.
Yeah.
I gotta.
It's not
find
even a good
story.
it's not even a good story. Man, I swung on an ice agent and my back went out. You know, that's a story.
I'm emailing it to you. I'm emailing to you now so you can.
I threw my McDonald's cup in the water. That's almost even more of a story.
Yeah, it's a real. I was just like, bro, this is but this is what I'm saying. Like it becomes I make an analogy about pollution at the beginning. Should be coming through soon.
Yeah,
just send it. But
that is hilarious. Yeah, I'm sorry. You were talking about your analogy.
Yeah, let me play this real quick. I got it.
I got it.
Or you got it? Go ahead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Everything just started slowing down here for all of a sudden. I don't know. Here we go. Oh, wait. I got to stop. So StreamYard, if you're listening, can we get the option of sharing more than one thing at once so we could do some better transitions in the studio? That'd be great. Thank you, StreamYard. All right, here we go. Let's see. Let's try this here.
Can't throw actual ICE agents into the harbor because we are a nonviolent movement, but we are here symbolically throwing 342 pounds of ice into the harbor.
Oh man.
We can't throw actual ice.
Yeah, you can't make this shit up, man.
But salute to the I've seen that creator too. Who's this creator? Because I would have that I gotta the Ebony War Ryer Studio. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
But the adding the liberals on there and the music is just that was chef's kiss, as they say. That's hilarious.
Ebony Warrior Studios, yeah. That
is that what it says? Ebony Warrior Studios. That makes sense. That was right, of course. Yeah, duh.
That was bad. But yeah, that's but that's what I'm hilarious. Saying. Like that was I was 10 pounds off. I thought it was 352. It was 342 pounds. So like logistically you had to go. I mean, that's a lot of ice.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you had to basically go to the gas station and buy, they have that shit outside. They probably bought the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like all the bags inside.
All of them.
Yeah.
Man, and somebody's beer was warm. That's messed up too. Like on top of that too, somebody's beer was warm. Somebody was like, God damn. He's like, people drinking warm beer. That's messed up on top of all that liberalism.
Yeah, it was bad. But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the propaganda gone wrong, because at some point we know propaganda works when you know it's propaganda, but you understand like what you're trying to do. When you start believing your own propaganda, and I feel like that maybe is some of the problem with nonviolence, people start believing that it's really that simple, right? Like we need to just make these kind of empty moral stands against things, and that's that
line, man. Salute to my godfather, man. That line he said when from working on Jesse's first presidential campaign, he said Jesse did something like Jesse had it all figured out. He did everything right until he believed he could actually win.
Yep. And I think
then he fell off the rails. So yeah, it's like the same. They believe their own.
Yeah,
that's the story, son. You supposed. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. It's like that's the way we. It's like that's the thing about propaganda. We're always taught it's just this inherently negative thing anyway. But you got to know what you're telling people is not. I mean, I don't think you should be lying to folks. But propaganda it's not even just simplifying it. It's also just frames things in a way that makes things make sense, right? Like it also is able to do that. This doesn't make any sense. Like, throwing 300 pounds of water in water. You know, like it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, you mentioned it. Let me just show this before we go back to your piece, and then folks, if you have questions for Two Black or comments, please recycle them, and I'll pull them up. But this is so again because of Laura's From the Clinic to the Streets. I just was looking again at this manual, and this is again from the counterinsurgency, the Army counterinsurgency PSYOPs manual from just about 19 years ago, 20 years ago. And you know, they're talking about like they have this whole thing about how to lay out stories and headlines to draw the eye and create a certain aesthetic, informal diagonal balance, you know, just to they're I mean, it's fascinating the how the sequential eye direction, you know, what is going to draw the eye in what ways, and how to you know, use symbol to draw people's eyes. And then they got to this section on color. So when you were just talking about the various color revolutions, they get into how, you know, various colors target different cultures and target audiences. Green for Islam, of course, and red to Americans may mean danger, but in China it's good luck. So you need to know these things about who you're targeting. Colors may be used to harmonize with the moods of illustrations or message within the frame of reference of the target audience. In some countries, red may be used to suggest violence, blue or green for peaceful scenes, and black or white for death. So I mean, they're just so. Again, I just to some of the points you were making and others that this is colonial. The colonizer is putting in work to figure this out and mess with us. And
yeah. No, go ahead.
No, that was it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you're not on level to respond to it, then, you know, because I'm saying, like, again, I think when nonviolence emerged, Lasordo traces it back to like he traces it back really to the United States, actually, like to like the pacifists and you know, the Quakers and some of them, even though some of the Quakers were very violent. But he even talks about how they could not reconcile with, like, when they're trying to be, you know, the abolitionist movement at the time is trying to reconcile with slavery, and they had to eventually be like, yeah, we're gonna have to go to war with these folks, like, because it would be more violent to just stand by on the wayside and let slaves be brutalized than to go to war, right? Like, that was just kind of eventually, if you read the writings of people from that time, that's where their position arrived at, right? Like, because you can't, so even all the way back to the 1800s, there was just kind of implicit understanding that you got to deal with the power dynamics here. We can't just be like utopian, nonviolent in the wilderness somewhere. That has no impact on the actual world that we live in. That might make us feel good, but has no impact on the world that we live in. And then you look throughout history, even a lot of Gandhi's tactics, for better or worse, he drew from that. Gandhi really gets introduced to a lot of nonviolent stuff when he was out of the country, funny enough, and then brings some of that back home and then develops it. But
yeah, he didn't have them thoughts. I read some of that stuff he was writing when he was young in South Africa. He wasn't always on some. Yeah, he was an interesting character. He went through some changes. We'll give him credit for that, at least.
Yeah, and even in the piece, I quote, he says, "It is better to be violent if there is violence in our hearts than to put the cloak of nonviolence to cover impotence." You know, and Dr. King didn't ever went that far, but he said he had no love for, I talked about this when I was on here last time, they had no love for people who weren't confrontational. They had no love for cowards, you know, and throwing ice in the water is cowardly. But I'm saying, like, they had no love for cowards. So that's why in the first piece I emphasized, like, confrontation.
It's not that. And you're right. There has to be some distinguishing here. Yeah.
But the dialogue has been flattened. It's also, you know, in the United States, we know there's a major push, particularly since the rise of like internet and social media, for like just nostalgia And nostalgia is another form of propaganda because it never tells you what actually happened. So for those of us who are old enough to have been wherever the thing is that people are talking about, we're like, that's not really what happened. But sometimes even people who were there believe the nostalgia so much that they'll tell the story like that's what really happened. So it's like a lot of that too, where the people are recalling these stories, like, and I'm like, but when you read like the stuff that people said about these eras, man.
Look at what, I mean, it's in this. I don't mean to keep coming back to this
No,
manual,
I'm gonna peep this though.
But it's right there. Female voices are used to exploit nostalgia, sexual frustration, or to attract female audiences. I mean, that's just one example when I just searched for the term real quick. Because in the part Laura cites, they make a reference to this. Programs are produced to induce such emotional reactions as confidence, hope, fear, nostalgia, frustration. So again, I mean, it's written, it's got 20 pages of references in here. So yeah, it's I'm just following your lead here, but
I appreciate it.
And I will put the link to this in the show description.
Yeah,
where I downloaded the PDF. Yeah,
I'm gonna peep this because I think it might help with some more stuff I want to write on this. But yeah, like the civil rights, because particularly in the United States, like the civil rights nostalgia is become kind of nauseating, honestly. But like we like to go back and tell these stories about it makes everybody feel like we were doing something, and we were at the time. But it's this like often looking back and not really thinking about what to do about what's in front of us, right? So we just there's been, particularly under like the Obama run, there was a bunch of Henry Louis Gates style, even if he didn't produce them, Henry Louis Gates style like productions that came out, like because they felt like this was the culmination of so there was all these like comparisons to Dr. King, and that shit really did a number on people. Like, cause I mean, there was a lot of documentaries, and that's when we got those films like Selma and many others, right? Like, and we've even gotten inundated with more since Obama, right? With like, and the kind of
he's making them now.
Yeah.
Obama's making them now.
Yeah. So it's like you get this sense that they're oversimplified, and whatever value that whatever propaganda value that nonviolence used to serve, which was like I said earlier, these people are terrible. They need to be stopped. That was the point of like, you get beat up and stuff. Like, we're going to take the more high ground because we don't want to be corrupted like these people, and we want them to stop. We want this thing. That was the point of it, not showing that you're a good person and you are not willing to just stoop to the level. It's like, no, there's a very particular thing we're trying to move forward here. And that more and more has lost. And it's just now become more about like people just acknowledging a position. Like, I was young enough. I remember when Black Lives Matter first emerged, and I feel sorry for myself. I ever look back at all those times I had arguments with people about just saying if Black Lives Matter and whether or not that, and it's like, who gives a shit? Like, but we were just trying to get people to acknowledge the term. Like, people would say it was racist. So we would argue that it was racist or that it wasn't racist with somebody who was saying it was racist. And then eventually, the Democratic Party was like, yeah, we actually support Black Lives Matter because it costs them nothing. It's similar to that when we were talking about H. Rap Brown last month, and he was like, black folks wanted to be called black. So the white man was like, all right, you can be black. Like, all right, like that doesn't, we're not going to concede the political struggle though. So you get into these kind of rhetorical or moralistic positionings like, oh, well, Black Lives Matter and racism is real. Y'all need to acknowledge it. And it's like, once they acknowledge it and they tell you Black Lives Matter, what's going to happen? But it's that aversion to there actually being some force. There's aversion to that people have to sometimes be moved to do things beyond just moral, compelling. Sometimes there does need to be a gun to people's heads or some kind of proverbial gun, right? That moves people to do things that you want to be done. But you have to actually also know what you want beyond just like a kind of like, I feel like a lot of Black Lives Matter was just us wanting people to acknowledge our pain and stuff. And that's what I was saying, that there's a certain race to victimhood that I think that we have to confront, where, because it also creates this other thing where people know, even in like a more interpersonal space, if they can push their victimhood to the forefront of it, then they become the kind of authority on everything that we talk about because they've been victimized the most. You know. So
by the way, we about to get another Questlove documentary on Earth, Wind, and Fire. Talk about we get the. I think if let me know anybody the next documentary that comes out on Black culture that he has nothing to do with. Please, anybody, just let me know the next one. But real quick, before this nostalgia thing, it did make me think again, and I know it's a very different. He's got a very different political context, but I always appreciate the point that Marshall McLuhan used to make that our media environment has been constructed in such a way that he would make reference to the use of nostalgia and how it's deployed in our current digital media environment is the equivalent of, as he said, driving your car forward while looking in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you think about how that would work out for you in the short run, never mind the long run, it's not going to go very well. So he also, by the way, made the point that the media environment had done such a good job of suppressing dissident voices that, as he argued, terrorism was their only way to become heard, for anyone, a dissident voice to become heard. Not arguing for it or justifying it, just saying
that's what he said.
That's what he said.
Yeah. That's what he said.
So, and he was, upper middle class, white, male, Catholic, I believe, at least a good Christian something. So,
I think it's also, we don't want to, without like getting this channel canceled, and make sure I word this properly, but we don't want to follow sometimes the logical conclusion of the analysis that we put forward, right? Like that's
no, absolutely, no, actually, yeah.
So there's and I get why. I mean, there is real danger in that, but I'm just saying there's a inability sometimes to. I think that's part of why there's the aversion, materially speaking, because there's like, oh, if we go down that road, we kind of know where that can go, right? We don't know entirely, but we know where that can lead us. So we try to find something else to make us feel like we're going down that road. That's the nostalgia part of it, but we're not really going down that road, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can create symbols of militancy and symbols of radicalism and symbols of these things, then it can feel like we are there when we're not. And instead of just acknowledging, like King did in his own work, that we don't have a military and we're deploying this tactic largely because we don't have one. And he was clear about that. Yeah, and this is a better way to get it done because we don't have a military. Like just acknowledging the actual limitations of what you have, as opposed to saying this is just some morally superior, and
condemning the idea. Exactly. And that, by the way, I meant to say, and I do appreciate that your work does that. It's again, we're not, and I'm going to throw myself in this category. We are not advocating anything. It's just acknowledging either from my vantage point, the role of certain tactics in history, and then recognizing what the interplay of certain behaviors and claims are. So it's, that, and similar to how I understood McLuhan, that it's not an advocacy for certain action. It is just simply saying the current construct leads to certain conclusions.
It leads to certain ends. If you cut off the more peaceful means of addressing grievances, and those grievances are still not being addressed, then it's not far-fetched to believe that people will seek other means to address those grievances. Without
those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable.
So if you, which I think even in the United States we're increasingly seeing that. I don't know where that particularly is going to lead, but I'm just saying, if you're trying to imprison people for taking food to Cuba, like we just saw with was it Medea Benjamin and Hassan Piker, or if you're sanctioning folks for just simply, or you see with the flotilla folks in Israel, and they're getting sexually assaulted and beaten up by Ben Gvir, then I'm saying, like, you know, you make somebody's watching that and they're like, oh, okay. And I mean, this is not new. Like even when I was reading about Gandhi, like in the non-cooperation movement, I talk about in the piece the Shuri incident, where he actually calls it off because in short, the British police shoot Indian protesters dead, and they had already had multiple massacres leading up to this moment. This is 1922, so they chased the police into a building because they were retreating, and they burned the building down with the police in it because like they had just had enough, because there have been multiple massacres very similar where they just shoot into a crowd. This is a very like British, trained
let me
thing.
if I can take just quickly one, beg my indulgence here, if you would, just because I'm one, please everybody go see the discussion we had with Laith Maroof on Black Liberation Media about Palestine TV, where he actually says, to your point about the flotilla, he says the organizers of that flotilla should be held accountable and responsible for bringing the people into that setting. He was very critical of just that whole setup. Like, why are you, if you already, to paraphrase, that you should know better. And I was so I thought that was pretty interesting as an argument. And then this other thing, to your point, real quick, I'm gonna tease tomorrow's show, because you mentioned the British in the context of colonialism, and then I'm gonna use this as a segue to come back to this question around your point about Ghana and positive action. But just check this out in terms of your whole, just exactly what you were saying about what precipitates certain reactions. This is now we're going Palestine, precipitating the 1936 revolt. Just this quick section here, just briefly.
Brought the full force of the empire to bear.
So they're talking about how the British claiming, so the British who are already there unjustly were claiming that again, much like we hear about today, in response to what Palestinians did, in response to your colonialism, they now say, here's our response to what you did.
Britain deployed 2 full divisions, nearly 25,000 regular troops, alongside heavy artillery and the Royal Air Force. By the end of 1938, there was 1 British soldier for every 37 Palestinian Arabs. Villages were blown up. Whole sections of Arab Jaffa were leveled. Villagers were herded into barbed wire cages for days without food or water. In the cages of Hulhul, 13 people died of dehydration. When the Royal Ulster Rifles lost 4 of their own to a Palestinian landmine, they descended on the village of Al-Bassa, along with the 11th Hussars. They torched the village, rounded up 50 men, forced them onto a bus, then ordered the driver to run over a landmine. Survivors were cut down by machine gun fire. The British...
Just one quick example. So, I mean...
yeah, I mean... we can do Mau Mau too, right? We can do.
We could go all day. Yeah, I just happen to have that one queued up.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, even coming back to the flotilla point, it's, yeah. I think that's the thing. It's like if I'm going to put myself in harm's way, what am I leveraging in back in my direction, right? Like, because this is all just military stuff to me. Like whether I just want to say I say in the piece the difference between, or the line between nonviolence and violence is an astigmatism. It's like there's not a real divide, because even in warfare there are moments where it's nonviolent, quote unquote. Like if you want to be literal, like there's Iran is right now, there's no direct firing of ammunitions, because the United States barely has any. but it's like, But so there's this placating with the deal, and we're gonna blow it up today, we're gonna make a deal tomorrow. But this is all just part of warfare, right? Like we understand that. Like it's all just part of warfare. We don't sit around and try to make, well, that's nonviolence. Like, no, like diplomacy is part of warfare just as much as bombs are part of warfare. Right. So nonviolence, in a sense, like if you're going to do it in that way, it's a part of a war. It's part of warfare, but it's warfare. That's what we're doing. So we have to understand it in that context and not this moralistic. Again, I'm not against the morality of things. I'm just saying, like, it can't be broken down in this like separate thing. And that's why I open with, we're all in the gunk. If we understand it as warfare and trying to get a boot off your neck and trying to make sure that boot never gets back on your neck, or that person doesn't even have a boot, then you do what you need to do. So if you're gonna, take a flotilla somewhere and hope for, I don't know how many flotillas there have already been. I don't really know anymore what people can do to show how terrible Israel is. I think we've won that argument. So it becomes, what else can you do to actually move them beyond just getting people to accept how terrible Israel is as a country? I think the world already understood that more broadly, and even people in America are starting to understand that more broadly, right? So at some point, the moral kind of position of like people just seeing how nasty and mean your opponent is, once you've won that battle, then you have to start thinking about what are other ways to bring them to heel, what are other ways to get what we want out of the situation, because you approach it from the perspective of warfare. What made the civil rights movement and some of the movements, the Indian independence movement and others that I referenced, what made those effective, for even despite all the nostalgia and the fact that people don't tell the full story, was they have very specific objectives that they were trying to win. They didn't win all of them, but they have very specific objectives they were trying to win, and they picked their targets. Particularly particularly the civil rights movement was really good at it got better over time at picking its target, because that was one of the biggest advantages it has from a warfare perspective. Is there's the entire South, and we get to go wherever we want in the South to make a problem, right? So I talked about in the first piece about going to Albany, Georgia, and how that didn't work out with Chief Pritchard, because he was not a very, relative to the other chiefs of police, he was not a very violent chief. He had much more of a fox-like mind. So they're like, all right, we're going to go to Bull Connor, who loves to kill niggas and beat them up and blow, he loves to do that, right?
Can't help himself, can't stop himself, because Pritchard wasn't no fan. No, he just had enough of a I don't know, a lever on it.
Yeah,
he's like,
he also understood the warfare of it, but it's like, because it was like that more liberal approach to things, like you concede certain stuff, you don't go ham-fisted with everything. But like with Bull Connor, it's like, all right, I'm just gonna go all in, and that brought a different response. But they were able to pick those targets. When they say we're gonna do a freedom summer in Mississippi, they understood we're going to Mississippi, and we all know what Mississippi means. Like, those are targets you get to pick. If you're going to do freedom rides, you get to pick those targets. Like, these are targets that people got to pick, going to the most dangerous areas, understanding what the contradictions were beyond just the South, that you have the Cold War, you have the United States trying to expand its image, and you're playing all of these things off of each other. Like Kwame Ture talked about how the point was to play the contradiction of the North versus the South off each other. Like, you're trying to play these things off each other. Like, Iran is trying to play like these Gulf states off the United States and put them in a position where they can't be unified by like, that's just strategy. That's warfare. So I'm saying, if you're going to do nonviolence, even if you don't want to pick up arms, you still got to approach it with that kind of thinking, and not just, we're going to go out here and we're going to throw ice and water and hope that ice just goes away. Like, that's not how that's gonna work.
Even as a little kid, I remember I got into a fight with a friend of mine who was physically smaller than this bully who was bullying both of us. And he was like, well, why did you end up fighting me, getting mad at me too? And I was like, because you didn't do nothing when the bully swung at me. So it's like, if you're not going to stand with me, I'm swinging at you too. And that's how I saw Iran, is like, if everybody just going to stand here and let them bomb us like that, guess what?
Everybody can go.
Everybody can get it. So that's how
Yeah.
I was feeling. I was like, you not standing with me? Is this dude is? I was like, did you next?
Everybody can go.
Everybody can get it. So even as a kid, I was like, the logic to me is very clear. It's very clear.
Yeah, and that's why in the first piece
yeah.
it was like somebody's got to die. Like it don't who dies, you know, debate about how you do it, but it's like you have to be able to you have to be able to exact the consequence. Like that's how anything works. If if you can figure out that the consequence for somebody doesn't require you to pick up a gun or whatever, then picking up a gun is reckless. If you know that if I know to get you to do something that I simply need to embarrass you, and I know your actual profile by embarrassing you will move you to a position, then that's all I'm going to do. Right. But if you're somebody that can't really be embarrassed, then me continuing to try to embarrass you has no impact. You know, like it's all about like, how do we understand the target that we're fighting? So if you're impervious to being embarrassed and I'm just like, I'm going to keep trying to embarrass you and embarrass you and embarrass you, you're never going to do anything I want because it doesn't affect you. Right. Like, but if you're somebody that is like really, you know, insecure and the smallest criticism turns you, you know, makes you do what I want, then yeah, I'm going to play on that. I'm going to exploit that, right? Like that's how this works. So nonviolence has to be able to even figure out what is this, if you're targeting something, like what are the weaknesses of this target and how can we use this tactic to even exploit those weaknesses? But you have to understand what those weaknesses are to even exploit them. We cannot just be like, we're just going to go out and do something and hope that it brings the world to our side. That's not, and I do want to be fair. I don't think all nonviolence people are that ridiculously backwards and lost, but there is a tendency, I think, particularly today, that is promoted among too many people, where, you know, it doesn't work. Because again, it's not really about the weapon of choice. It's just about how do you get your objectives met. Because again,
that's why that manual says the militants can't be targeted with our propaganda. We have to the propaganda we use has to go to the people around them to discredit them. We'll have to deal with them differently. So yeah,
there's a book. Man, I did it a long time ago when I was on Millennials when they did that thing on journalism. It's a long time ago. It's like 5 years.
Oh, that yeah.
And Jared actually at this point probably references it more than I do, but it was about, I think it was a campaign. I think somebody was trying to shut down like a Nestle plant or something like that, and they broke people down in like 4 different categories. He talks about it more than I do. So he probably could recite it more, but like
I vaguely remember that or you talking about. Yeah.
And the campaign to end that fight was they broke people into these different categories. And I think it was like the radicals, the realists, the opportunists, and there was another category. It was 4 categories. I can't remember all, but like, so they, like, used to your point though, they're like, the radicals cannot be moved. So we don't even, like, our propaganda doesn't even deal with them. Like they are committed to their position. Our job is to isolate them, you know, from the rest of the community. COINTELPRO has documented that too. Like our job is to teach the Negro youth that basically this is a bad option, right? So our job is to separate the Black middle class kind of like sympathy for that position. Our job is to isolate them and make them seem like, you know, they're crazy or their position is not useful. So the realists, they're like, we'll go with whatever they think is the most pragmatic thing. You know, they're not going to like go to the most radical thing if they think there's another option. You know, the opportunists, that book taught me a lot about opportunists, but they were like, the opportunists are just going to go wherever the opportunity is. You don't even really have to, you know, it's like, you don't even really, yeah.
That's why the same one that was promising you crypto and NFTs last week is promising you, you know, I don't know, housing or AI this week. You know, it's absolutely.
Yeah.
Real quick Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. My bad.
Real quick, I was like, whenever I'm doing organizing out and people bring up an individual who is an opportunist, and I'm like, we don't, and they're like, we should get them to help support this thing, and I'm like, we should just gain momentum, and they'll come to us anyway because they ain't got nothing else to do.
Just like politicians, they show up.
You never have to recruit an opportunist.
So, I was with them all along.
Yeah. Like, you never have to recruit an opportunist. Though if your shit is popping, they'll always pull up. You just need to have a plan on what you're gonna do with the opportunist. You never got to recruit an opportunist. They will find their way to you. You know, they will read the signs. Yeah.
Let me pick up on that point as a segue to what will have to be for me the last question as we start to have to head towards a close. But at least for this discussion, but this planning point. So yeah, the opportunities are going to show up. So there should be some planning. One of the things that I really appreciated, and that you've already mentioned that you do talk about in this piece is the planning and the clarity and the political consciousness around that goes into preparing for nonviolent, direct, or in the case of Ghana, positive action. And as I read your piece, I was thinking, I don't recall ever reading anything specifically about this positive action movement within Ghana. So I mean, this is just another one of my blind spots. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about the specific positive action effort within Ghana. And then this point about the planning that went into it. It wasn't just, again, throwing a few 100 pounds of ice into the water and with some sort of disassociated vague, that's going to be forever. I think that's going to be embedded.
I wish I had that before I wrote this, man. I saw that after the fact. That was bad. Like if I write anything else, I will make sure that gets referenced. Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all owe it to their effort to work it into whatever we're doing. But yeah, but that's the point though. Like, what is, positive action? The point that always bothers me about King too, they always leave, it's nonviolent direct action that did involve planning and clarity and agenda items and all of those things. So yeah, could you talk about Ghana's positive action in the context of this planning thing, and then anything else you wanted to bring up that I didn't lead you to today?
Yeah, I have a little in the piece. I'm trying to remember the rest that I read beyond that, but it was positive action was so we'll start with Kwame Nkrumah. He was in different parties, so he actually changed his party. Like this starts in the 1940s to get independence from the British. First they're just trying. How the colonial kind of game work where you get like self-rule, which is not technically independence and all of that. So there was different transitions, but they eventually got independence. And there was different things, which I think even when people think about nonviolence, there's also a long list of different stuff that you can do. So one of their biggest things was they sent out pamphlets and they did political education to bring people to understand what the colonial power was doing. So they had like their own newspaper that eventually the government shut down, but they were able to like circulate it in other ways. They also engaged in strikes and boycotts. These are things that, we don't have real boycotts today, whatever they're worth, and we definitely don't do strikes. But it's important to note that because these were all seen as the world had a really positive image about India for however people feel about it. So when you read Nkrumah's speeches, like him and the people involved in this movement had a really positive image about India because they did get independence. So they were pulling a lot from that, but not entirely. Like they had their own kind of indigenous things too. And, but it's important to note that again, because like, somehow nonviolence has only become associated with like just standing in front of a moving car or, standing in like a place that's illegal and getting arrested. And that's the kind of action people associated with, or it's even worse. Like I'm going to just keep doing it. We throw water in the water or something like that. Right. So it's like, but it was also all these other complementary things. So marching which I think was mostly what people associated with marching, was just one of the things that they did. So they would do different actions. They'll go on strikes. They would march, and then that would bring about like these violent responses from the British government. And I talked about it in a piece one time when it happened. And Nkrumah then put out messages to the people to say, this is exactly why we need to be empowered, not them, because they can't even quell the violence, right? Because when the government beat the people down, then the folks did riot, and I believe they did kill a few folks. So Nkrumah exploits this, rightfully, in my opinion, to demonstrate this is why we should be empowered. But it also, in the piece, I'm talking about how that also shows like the insurgents' violence is helpful to your movement. You just have to know how to spin it. So eventually, I don't have I'd have to read through the history precisely to remember like the exact dates of stuff, but eventually through these different actions, the British pass a law, the Ghana Independence Act, which is wild that you have to pass an act for me to have independence. But eventually they pass a law, and then the crown also signs off on it, and they were able to get their independence in 1957. But it was pretty much forced through these different actions that they were engaged in for roughly like 10 to 15 years, even though there's like other prequels to it, just like there is in any kind of movement or whatever. It's often not really in the like I said, in the lore of nonviolent history. It's something that we usually hear about King and Ghana, or King and Gandhi, excuse me. And then lesser things. But yeah, that's how they were able to do it. What's interesting is once they get power, then it's around the time that Nkrumah comes in contact with Fanon, and he comes to the All African People's Conference, and that's when he does his speech about concerning violence. Like he starts presenting violence as something that the anti-colonial movement needs to take up. And this is also, I think, the same conference that Lumumba comes to and meets Nkrumah, the All African People's Conference. This is like 1958, I believe. And so then around that time, at this time, like now Ghana's in power, so they do have control over military. And then now Nkrumah is, moving forward, starts to have trainings in Ghana, and their liberation, trainings for soldiers to go and liberate the continent.
For everybody.
Yeah.
MK went there. Everybody was there. Yeah.
So then, so even in the stuff I was reading, it was in like a book on nonviolence. I can't remember. It's in the references. I can't remember the title, but like it's funny how they open and they're like, well, Nkrumah Ghana becomes this authoritarian government later on, but what people miss is their early history. There it is. Nonviolent resistance and independence movement, and then recovering nonviolent history of civil resistance and liberation. So yeah, it's specific to. It's a book that deals with like more understated stories, and one of those is the positive action movement. So it was mostly nonviolent, but there were also riots and things that did move it forward, And I think it was actually hard to find good literature on this. There's not a lot of stuff, at least in American or in English, even though you would think in a country that was under British rule, there would be more English stuff, but I couldn't really find a lot of stuff. So if anybody has more on that history, I would like to read more, because what I had primarily to pull from was like an essay that had a few other references.
Well, we're just supposed to vaguely practice nonviolence, not study it as an actual tactic. So I'm not surprised stuff is hard, is undercooked, as they say. By the way, folks, the link to Two Blacks essays and our previous discussion and the documentary I showed a little bit ago regarding British atrocities in Palestine, and even the liberal ICE Instagram piece and the counterinsurgency manual all are linked in the show description now. So everything we've been referencing is all there. So enjoy, dig in and enjoy. Yeah, man. Hey, so I'm gonna check the chat here real quick, and if they have any comments or questions for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you brought up that I didn't invite you to? Again, I really appreciate what you're doing with these, with well, all your work, but this particular series is I just love the lane that you're running in. So folks, please check the work, and it very well written, and the footnotes are all there. You can follow up and all of that stuff. Dr. Ball sent you an email regarding the Du Bois quote that was not a credit. Yeah, so this is about the Du Bois quote that I was asking about from the documentary. So we found that thank you very much. But in the video I did about that, we did find that, and Gerald Horn has had the source and all of this and the context that the PBS, the Henry Louis Gates PBS documentary did not have, surprisingly. So let's see. Thank you, Soul Mega. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, we love to we got to let folks, spit, as they say. Yes, Samantha talks a lot about, I caught this earlier in terms of the symbolism and the messaging and the, absolutely. And all the links are now in the show description. So
yeah, we
had some
problems with a few links yesterday, but they got it fixed.
Okay, good, good.
They should open up. I checked before I got on here. Other than that, unless there are any questions, I don't see any. But anyway, yeah, no, I mean, and as you continue to put stuff out, we'll continue to cover it. Obviously, Black Myths Podcast is available for folks to check out as well. And any updates on the Pendleton 2 while I got you here? Anything? Yeah, actually, thanks for bringing that up. We got an event in New York. Well, actually, I'm so bad at promotion. It's like funny, but I actually have a book talk in your city on Friday. I know you're banned from the venue, but I can never not laugh at that, man.
No, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And listen, man, listen, just real quick on that, and all jokes aside, listen, as I continue to age, I I'm sure somewhere along the line I could have behaved differently or responded differently and not made it worse, at least. But from my end, at least, look, no harm, no foul. You're talking about Sankofa books. Please, everybody, go check it out across from the Howard University, over there in the Good Georgia Avenue. Do they still refer to it as the Nile Valley District over there? At least it used to be called the Nile Valley District of DC. But anyway, yeah. So when is this? This
is I don't think anyone sent me a flyer, so I don't actually have a physical thing. Maybe it's on their page, but this is Friday.
Okay.
I think at 7:00, and then I have to go up to New York on Saturday. So it's a quick turnaround. Looking for the page here. I can at least share the flyer for that. I gotta go up to New York on Saturday to do a screening for the Pendleton 2, and then we have a pretty big campaign coming up internally amongst some of the MBROC organizations to help them. There will be, because there's going to be some, I don't want to give away too much, but there will be some legal tactics that we're going to be trying. So we're going to be doing some direct action ourselves relative to what we can do to try to bring pressure for that. So looking for This is what happens when you have a million.
Too Black is an important public intellectual, no doubt, no doubt, no questions because of the clarity. Of course. So what I've learned from this conversation is that nonviolence, much like the lesser of two evils, is a psyop. I mean, it depends. It depends. If it depends how it's deployed, is I think how I would respond.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an entirely a psyop. I didn't emphasize it much in this conversation, but the goal. Are you seeing my screen? It says I'm sharing a screen.
Yeah, I got you. There it is. There it is. Yep.
So this, I want to speak to the side point real quick before we get off, but like this is the event we're doing in New York. So we're showing the documentary that myself and my co-director King Trill produced or directed. Pendleton too, they stood up. So we're going to be showing that at the People's Forum for those who are in the New York area. It's a free event at 5 o'clock. So please show up to that. I have not been promoting this as well as I would have liked. So I'm trying to make some late stage promotion. I'll probably put this on our page for people to see. But this is sponsored by multiple organizations: BAB, Black Men Build, CNB, Spirit of Mandela. And then it's part of an overall like IMPROC events that we've been doing. So please check that out. In terms of you can take that off now, but in terms of the psych-op, again, anything can be a psych-op. So I think we need to be careful with trying to label particular like expressions of things psych-op. So like, even armed struggle, if done poorly, can be a psych-op, right? Like so that's what I'm saying. We're all in the gunk here. So this is not about like bashing nonviolence, because if anything you do that has no planning and strategy, it's not going to be done well. So if you want to go pick up a gun today, you don't know where you're shooting, you don't know how to shoot it, that's not going to go well either. so it's like, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't have a kind of dialogical understanding of the situation, it doesn't really matter like what the particular tactic that it is that you're using or what the weapon of choice is. If you don't know what you're doing, you just don't know what you're doing, right? So you need to know what you're doing. And like we said, or like it's pointed out in the first piece, you have to know what you're hoping to confront, because this is ultimately about confrontation. If you're willing to die for something, you're trying to confront something to move it to a position. You don't just like go out here and do it for the sake of doing it. So we have to approach it that way. So it's like, the lesson from this should not be nonviolence sucks and violence is the way, because I don't actually think there's a real division here. That's what I'm saying. We say nonviolence is violence too. There's not really. It's all violence. So it's really just a question. So when we make that distinction, we need to just eliminate it and more so think about war and what are more like, direct forms of violence in war and what are more indirect forms of violence in war. Like, but it's warfare, and you have to think about how you are going to move when you're going to war about something. So some phases of war require some things, some phases of war require other things, but it's war.
No, I'm sorry to be laughing, and I'm gonna let you respond to this. Slim D is in the chat and is saying let's confront getting that check. And yes, I'm willing to die for it. And similarly, do you have a campaign or direct action for getting that check cut to Black?
Who are we talking about? Reparations, or what's the check?
I'm assuming Slim D is talking about. I saw somewhere else they talk about reparations. I'm assuming it's about reparations.
Okay, I was like, make sure I understood.
And willing to die for that check. For I'm sorry. How big a check? How big is the check that you would die for? I do have, I did want to ask. So Kyle Johnson is asking, any thoughts on Walter Rodney and how his work as an activist scholar relates to this conversation? Similar to this, and thinking about, because he did cross my mind in terms of the guerrilla intellectual piece, and especially, but answer this as you would like, if you would please. But if you would also add to it this part B or whatever that I'm trying to formulate here real quick, which is, what does I guess, what does militancy look like to you? What counts as militant action or behavior to you, as in the context of your dialectical look at violence, nonviolence?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer on recording.
I know. I don't know. But I mean,
But
so I mean, in terms of, well, because
Yeah.
I'm thinking of it in terms of like sort of Walter Rodney's critique of the institutional or colonial academic. So like a couple semesters ago, and I admit it stays on my mind, especially because of what I think is the background process as to how this ended up happening in my classroom. But I did have a student say to me a couple semesters ago that Dr. Ball, you are a compromised academic. And but after getting defensive and sitting in the defensiveness for a minute, I did come back to ask. It took a couple days because I just let that marinate. You know, I was like, I don't have a good answer at the time, or I think it was at the end of class. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I came back a couple days later after letting it marinate to ask, I don't really have a good answer to that, because what does an uncompromised academic look like? What would I be doing if I was not compromised as an academic? What would I be doing that I'm not doing? And then I did ask, what does a compromised student look like? I admit that I was a little bit,
yeah.
well, also honest, but a little petty also. But yeah, like, so that's, again, it's in there that I'm asking that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to think dialectically, and I don't mean that, I don't like to just throw that word around to sound deep or what. I'm just saying, like, for me, if we believe our analysis that we're all under a colony and we're all under imperialism, then the question of who's compromised and who's not doesn't really seem to answer anything for me. Because I don't work in academia, and it might leverage me more freedom to write certain things. But then I also come on a show with you. So what am I compromised because I'm talking to you, because you lend me this space, right? Like that's, so I feel like when we get into that kind of, thing that, I don't think we're really giving a real analysis, because we're trying to get into a kind of purity fetish there. I don't know if I'm following what you're saying. That person says to you, and this is not to erase this is not to like just say anything goes, or it's okay to work anywhere and you just do what you want, and since we're all compromised, we're all going to be the worst person. I'm not saying that on the other extreme either. I just don't know. So I'm always a little conflicted with arriving at a position of purity that's where I'm doing this thing in this most pure way and you're like the sellout coon or whatever. I think sometimes that dichotomy doesn't necessarily lend, no true Scots, but I don't think it really lends clarity on what there is to be done. I more so look at it like you need to be in contact with collectives, organizations, one, because anytime we get into this position of me as an individual is moving in the proper way and you as an individual is not, both of those are failed positions for me. So you need to be part of an actual project that's trying to bring about a certain kind of world, and that has multiple things in motion at once and is not solely reliant upon you. So that's one. Two, even if we're thinking about this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold up a second. I'm sorry. Hold up a second on that one. I need you to say that last part again, because that part.
Yeah, listen. That's cool.
That's that last part. That not solely say that part. How did you say that?
I think I said not solely dependent upon you, right? Like, yeah.
Oh man. Yes.
Because I mean that's how you get cults of personality, you get all kinds of problems if everything's built around one person. Doesn't mean some people won't carry more weight than others, but a team is a team, and you can't, everything can't be built around one person. So some of this I feel like is people trying to like individually parse out things that, what project are you a part of and what are you actually trying to do, right? Because otherwise it feels kind of utopian. So being a militant or being a guerrilla intellectual, you're trying to figure out how you can redirect resources, redirect understanding, redirect intellectual discourse to these things that we're involved in. I'm not naming them on purpose because that could be a lot of different things, to achieve, again, coming back to the warfare thing, to achieve a particular objective. All right. So there's become a thing within our spaces where we're just like speaking truth to power, or just telling the truth, or just having an analysis. But what are we trying to move people towards? Right? Like that has to be the question, not just I said it. Like I think I said this when I was on here last time, this kind of hot potato activism or hot potato radicalism, where it's like, you know, I won't do the thing, but I'm going to inspire you to do the thing. Like that kind of Tupac quote, like, I'm not going to change the world, but I'm going to inspire the person that will. And I honestly hate that quote, but it's just like, because I don't even think he meant it that way, but I'm just saying it's this sense of somebody else is going to do it. I'm just going to go be a teacher and hope that somebody else picks up the thing that I'm too scared to do. Right. Like that kind of, you know, I think that's a bit of
I think that's Tupac's equivalent to Darwin's survival of the fittest. You know, it's something that's been so misrepresented and mistaken out of context of what the person meant and what their life was trying to say, that it doesn't mean anything anymore.
No.
That I'll at least want to give Pac that level of credit, because I've heard that before, and I don't. Yeah, and I've heard it misused before. I should say.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he meant. I remember I'm still a fan. I used to be a big Pac fan, so I watched a lot of those interviews in full. So he was saying more than that. And this is also somebody coming out of a much different context. But it's weird to see the next person be like, I want to be the person that inspires the person that will. And then we just keep picking it up. And it's like, so is anybody gonna do it? It's like, no, I want to inspire the person to change. And that's what I mean by hot potato. Like, you just passing it around. I'm gonna inspire you to do the thing I don't want to do, and I'm gonna inspire you to do the thing I don't want to do. And it's just like, well, at some point, somebody gotta do the thing, right? Like at some point, we can't just like hope that the next person does it, right? so you know, it's like, and I think some of it is also, you know, what are you willing to not be invited to? What are you willing to not be a part of? What are you willing to actually sacrifice sincerely? Like, so even if you are not, like me and Rasul always joke about this, the dead white man in a rocking chair in our head. And anytime we see a scholar or somebody that we think sucks or whatever, we always have to check it, because that's the dead white man in a rocking chair in our head, you know, trying to tell us that we're better than this scholar and we need to be this. When we were talking about a particular scholar who has fallen off, I won't say their name, and it's like, this is exactly why you don't want to be that, because you're hot for a moment and then they just move on to the next person. Like, and you got what out of it? Some good speaking gigs, maybe you paid down a mortgage or something, I don't know, but like your work doesn't really have any, it doesn't resonate with people because they're just on to the next hot topic, right? So you have to be trying to ground things for people to understand, so they can go do things that you also.
I'm with Robin.
It's a very obvious scholar, but that if y'all took a few guesses, I'm sure y'all could figure it out. I won't say. But I'm just saying, like, you know, like it's good to if you're not feeling that tension though, like, because it's okay to have that tension. Like, all right, they don't really want me here, but if everybody wants to talk to you and everybody likes your work, then I don't really know if it's that good. So, you know, if everybody wants you in the space, you're the most popular person everywhere, you know. So yeah, we got to feed ourselves. We got to take care of ourselves. That's why the compromise thing is weird for me, because I'm like, people have to take care of themselves, you know. And I feel like we've gotten to a point where we try to like fetishize that as if people don't have to do things to take care of themselves. I just think we have to also just simply tell the truth, simply be honest about our limitations, right? Like, we don't, like I was saying with King when he's like, we don't have a military, so we're going to do this. So instead of trying to dress it up and say, I'm here because I secretly infiltrated the university and all that, it's like, you work like everybody else. Just shut the fuck up and go to work. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to make it a thing bigger than what it is. Like, you work, and in your labor, you're trying to, you know, reproduce things better than what maybe they're paying you to do. Right. But to be like, I'm the most like uncompromised, like, I just feel like that doesn't really move things forward. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how, you know.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Real quick, they did send me the flyer real quick. I do want to.
Oh yeah, please
share my
screen. And then I can add it to this show description too, if it's a link or if there's a link for it. Slim D, and to be fair, you're right. This is a fair question, and I want to just take a quick second to answer you, Dr. Ball. Why is the topic of reparations laughable to you? So I don't mean, and I think that's a fair question. I don't mean to laugh at the idea of reparations or a legitimate movement for reparations at all. what made me laugh today is that honestly, what made me laugh today, and I don't know you at all, so I don't know where this is coming from, but what made me laugh today was in the context of a discussion we're having, as I'm interpreting it, about efforts to move Black people away from the more radical, logical conclusions of an appropriate analysis of our situation. Reparations to me becomes one of the many topics that is just as we were talking about in terms of violence or nonviolence or now I just slipped what were we just now talking about?
Guerrilla intellectual,
guerrilla intellectual compromise, whatever it is. To me, reparations becomes like many of these topics that gets intentionally misrepresented, liberalized, and platformed in very reactionary conservative ways to get us away from radical engagement with the structure and the society we're living in. So even earlier, and I did star your point here about $10 trillion to $14 trillion equates to $840,000 distributed per household. And again, just very quickly, and this is an oversimplification of my own argument because I don't want to take all day, but I think it's fair to respond to you because I did laugh when you brought it up. To me, this in and of itself, absent the context that I think we're trying to discuss in this conversation and elsewhere, it becomes, even if it were to happen, and I think that's a whole other conversation, is how we would get to that point where this would happen. It doesn't address itself to the structures that created the inequality in the first place. It doesn't mean that much more than, I mean, we could even say $800,000 could very quickly be transferred right back to the owners of the economy in a day.
It would be.
And it would be. Okay, I was trying to, okay, fair enough. I mean, but so that's what I'm trying to get at. So when I'm laughing, I don't mean to diminish the concept or the struggle in and of itself, but I do, and I did today laugh, having a visceral reaction to it coming up in the context of the discussion we're having here, because it perfectly fits with the rebranding of a lot of the forms of struggle that I think we need to be focused on. So that's my quick, insufficient answer. But I did think it was fair to offer up some kind of response.
I'll say something very quickly. I know I didn't. This is off the top of my head, so I don't want to speak as some kind of expert on it. But it's not that none of that should happen. That it's not that you should say. It's just like we say we get healthcare or something. It's not that because we're in capitalism we shouldn't get healthcare. So nobody's saying, and I don't think you're saying that you shouldn't get reparations because you're under capitalism. Like nobody's saying. It's just that if it's just that that's not the final boss. You know, like it's just not, that's not going to eliminate all the problems. So, you know, if we want to really, I mean, nothing really eliminates all the problems, but in terms of the ultimate contradiction, that does not address the like ultimate contradiction. I think that was more so how I would think about it. So I'm never going to be like against reparations. Of course not. But I do think that there is a consideration to be had about if you get some form of reparations, but you still have to go back to Amazon, you know, to purchase the things that you want, or you still have to go through the market that, you know, has predatory housing or whatever to get those things. So it could definitely bargain a better position if the politics are in the right place. So again, I'm never going to be against it, but I do think that there's a tendency to see it as like kind of the smoking gun ultimate thing. And I don't think, and I'm not talking about the commenter, I don't know them, but I think so I'm not speaking on them for the record, but I think a lot of folks like reparations has become a nice thing to advocate for because you'll do a study or, you know, you'll give some, like create some little small fund or whatever, you know, and then you can say you did it and everybody likes the idea because whenever you're talking about people getting money and a particular group getting money, people are going to like that idea. I mean, you know, like it's going to be appealing, but you know, how to bring it about. I know there are real organizers on that front, so I don't want to, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to besmirch it, but I think that
that sort of gets to the point that I was asking you. Sorry, my bad.
No, go ahead. That was all I had to say. Go ahead.
But that gets to the point that I was getting at with the question for you about positive action, direct action, nonviolence. That to me, it's in that category. And without clarity and around what are the goals, what are all of the options involved, as you've just been discussing in this in the previous piece and discussion. Without all of that, these concepts become meaningless, and they become, even to your point earlier about ripe for the grift. This is the point. If reparations is not attached to a clear political movement and agenda, or a set of agenda items, and then as I think we've seen, so many individuals and groups can pop up claiming with some level of militancy, I'm fighting for reparations and I want that check. And it sounds great. It's an applause line and all of that. But then what? And if I can, I'll even just give this, I don't mind. I'm you know, look, please, I don't mean to diminish getting a check of that size, but that Freedom Scholar check that I got a couple of years ago, I think is a good microcosm example of what we're talking about. Technically, immediately, it went from my account out to the owners of the economy. I mean, technically, it was almost immediate. I think I kept it in there just so I could take a screenshot of the number, but it's gone. Yeah. And more importantly, it doesn't. What did it do for any of you watching? That's what I think is, like, that's what I'm saying. Like it was. And I hate to say it this way, because I know we're all, there's a lot of levels of struggle out here, but it don't even really do as much as I thought. Like it don't even do as much as you think it's going to do. There's so. And then if you think about helping others, if you start to think even outside of your immediate household, it becomes, you see immediately how impossible and how limiting it is. So I'm not trying to, so that's really all I mean. And I just don't want anybody who wants reparations to lose sight of what we could be wanting that is even more. That's really all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, like H-Rap said, we have to define the means. We no longer say just by any means necessary. We have to define the means that are by which are necessary. So you have to be more precise, and sometimes even hold a uncompromising position that may not always bring everybody to your side, but in the long run, it might be better because it's not opening the floodgates for anybody's interpretation, right? Because that's what he was saying. He was like, if you say by any means necessary, it allows cats to be like, they just doing their own thing. So I'm gonna go over here and get the mayor's money, and I'm fighting, and I'm gonna go over there. And that's what we live in today, where we've created this like plurality of, it's not to say that there is just one way, but we've created this over plurality of different approaches to the thing that people don't even know what they're identifying anymore, because it's just you can just say, well, yeah, I support it. Like it's one of the things that I just don't think really costs people anything to say they support, particularly when celebrities and them do it. It doesn't cost you anything. And I think that's a
politicians,
good measure.
It becomes a line for them too. Like how many years Conyers used to be praised every year. Conyers puts the reparations bill on the table, and it's like, yeah, to get a study that nobody votes for. Like, and then it's like, hooray. And then what else is going on? But listen. Unfortunately, I do have to go to Slim D and anybody else interested in this topic. Please, we will revisit it here and elsewhere. Please also
Can you just share that?
I got you. I'm gonna get there in a second. I wasn't gonna leave. But I just wanted to wrap this part up. That if you go to this platform, definitely if you go to Black Liberation Media, Black Myths has covered this. Like there's been discussions about reparations, and I would, so we will revisit them, come back and do them again. Please check the channels and others for the more substantive discussions. This was I just didn't want to just leave you hanging there with a laugh and a dismissal, because that doesn't deserve that, and I acknowledge that. But absolutely. And then I will add this. Tell us what this is, and I will put the link in the show description.
That's just the book talk.
Oh, right.
That just so people can see the flyer. give them a visual. I'll post all this on Black Liberation Media page.
Evan with the shades. You gotta be fly out here when you doing this work, no doubt. No doubt. I'm sorry, was there another link that you wanted? Or you know, there's no right, this is the flyer. There's no link to the flyer. All right,
I mean,
folks, just make
there's
sure
an RSVP at the bottom there, but yeah.
So Sankofa.com/Sankofa events. So either I'll put the link, or at minimum you can just pause the video, copy the, write down or whatever, and go to Sankofa.com, and you'll find the events page, and make sure you get over there to see that. And man, I appreciate you, man. This has been great as always. And please, everybody, check the great work. Links are all in the show description as usual. And yeah, man, that's it. Thanks to the Undefeated Chat. Peace, everybody. Only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say, and as Too Black is outlining in these various essays. And we'll catch you next time around here with more.
And what did you sacrifice? Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago, for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.